The phone was shaking in her hand as she screamed into it, "He's stealing my brand new car right now." But what Karen didn't know was that the man she was accusing was the car's rightful owner, and her lie was about to turn her world upside down. Marcus Johnson had always believed that life rewarded hard work, though his journey had been harder than most. He grew up in a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the South Side, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. From the time he was old enough to understand money, Marcus knew he'd have to work twice as hard as some people just to get half as far. And so, he did. He devoured his studies, graduated with honors, earned scholarships, and eventually carved a career as a mechanical engineer in a company that had never expected someone like him to rise so quickly. He had the life he once only dreamed of. He owned his own home in Lakeview Oaks, a polished suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns, winding sidewalks, and a lake where families took evening strolls. It wasn't perfect, but for Marcus, it was safety and stability. Most importantly, it was his. And sitting inside his garage was the crown jewel of his success, a brand new silver Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Purchased only 2 weeks earlier, that car meant more to Marcus than anyone in Lakeview Oaks could understand. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was the symbol of everything he had fought for, everything his mother had sacrificed for, everything his younger self had been told he would never achieve. Every line of its smooth body, every growl of its engine, whispered back to him that he had done it. He had built something real from nothing. He had earned it. But not everyone saw Marcus through the lens of his accomplishments. To some, his very presence in Lakeview Oaks was an offense. And no one embodied that mindset more than Karen. Whitfield. Karen was the self-appointed queen of Lakeview Oaks. She had lived there for over a decade, perched on the HOA board for most of that time, and eventually becoming its president. She was the type who carried her HOA binder like a badge of honor, knocking on doors to issue warnings about trash cans being left out too long or lawns cut a 1/4 inch too short. She smiled at some neighbors, scolded others, and kept a mental tally of who fit her idea of the neighborhood and who didn't. Marcus, in Karen's mind, never fit. It didn't matter that his lawn was neatly trimmed, that his house was always well kept, or that he had never once broken a single HOA rule. What Karen saw when she looked at Marcus was a man she believed didn't belong, too independent, too confident, too different from the homeowners she felt comfortable around. He didn't attend the HOA's seasonal potlucks, didn't make small talk at block parties, didn't nod along when Karen shared her unsolicited opinions. And the car, that sleek silver Mercedes, was the final straw in Karen's world. Marcus couldn't possibly afford such a thing legitimately. She didn't see hard work, promotions, and discipline when she looked at him. She saw what her prejudices told her to see: someone who must have cheated the system, someone who didn't deserve what he had. In Karen's mind, what Marcus had should rightfully belong to someone else, someone like her. That morning began like any other. Marcus had woken up early, stretched, brewed his usual cup of coffee, and planned his Saturday errands. He had a grocery list sitting on the counter, a few things to pick up for the house, and a plan to take his Mercedes for a long drive afterward, just to enjoy it. After years of second-hand cars and buses, he still savored the feeling of sitting behind the wheel of something brand new. He opened his garage, keys in hand, smiling faintly at the sight of his car gleaming in the morning sun. He'd washed it the day before, and the polished silver looked almost like liquid metal under the light. As he walked toward it, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the peaceful silence of the coal-to-dash sack. Karen was already storming down her driveway, phone in hand, sunglasses perched on her head, though the morning was still soft. She moved with frantic energy, her face twisted in righteous fury. Marcus didn't even have time to greet her before her voice cut through the air like a siren. "He's stealing my brand new car," she screeched into her phone. "Yes, right now he's in my garage. Hurry, before he drives away." Marcus froze. For a second, he thought he had misheard. The words felt surreal, almost laughable. His garage, his car. And yet here was Karen, shrieking into 911 as though she were the victim of a crime. He tried to speak. "Karen, This is my car. What? Are you? But she cut him off with a pointed finger, her voice sharp and full of venom. Don't you dare talk to me. I knew something like this would happen. You don't belong. Here you've probably been planning this for weeks. Marcus blinked, his mouth going dry. He had dealt with Karen's attitude before, the passive-aggressive comments about his lawn, the disapproving stares at HOA meetings, the way she conveniently forgot his name when speaking about him to others. But this was different. This wasn't an icy smile or a snide remark. This was an outright attack, a dangerous accusation, the kind that could spiral out of control in seconds. He looked around and realized neighbors were beginning to notice. Curtains twitched, doors cracked open. A jogger slowed to a stop at the end of the street, pulling out his earbuds to watch. The whole neighborhood was turning into an audience, and Karen was putting on a show. Officers, please hurry. Karen shouted into her phone, her eyes never leaving Marcus. He's about to drive off. He's dangerous. He's stealing my car. Yes, I just bought it yesterday. Marcus felt a cold chill run through him. She wasn't just lying, she was embellishing, making herself the victim, painting him as the aggressor. And she knew exactly what she was doing. In a world where too many black men had been treated as guilty before proven innocent, Marcus understood the risk he was in. One wrong move, one raised voice, one step that looked out of place, and the consequences could be irreversible. He raised, his hands slightly more out of instinct than anything else, his keys still dangling between his fingers. Karen, he said slowly. Carefully, this car belongs to me. I have the paperwork inside. I can prove it. But Karen only sneered. Oh, I'm sure you have some fake documents ready. People like you always do. The words hit him like a slap. People like you. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He swallowed hard, glancing at the street. The sound of sirens was faint, but growing closer. His heart began to pound. In a matter of minutes, squad cars would be pulling up, and he knew what they would see. A black man standing in front of a luxury car, an angry white woman screaming that he had stolen it. He had the truth on his side, but would that matter in the heat of the moment? His mind raced back to all the warnings his mother had given him growing up. Always keep your hands where they can see them. Speak calmly. Don't argue. Give them a reason. He hated that he had to live by those rules, but here he was, standing in his own driveway, about to live them again. Karen's voice rose higher, shriller, as though she were feeding off the attention of the watching neighbors. Yes, officers, he's still here. Hurry before he gets violent. Marcus clenched his jaw. Violent. She was setting the stage for something even darker. If the police arrived already primed to think he was a threat, what chance would he have? Took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay still, to stay calm, to stay visible. Every second felt like an eternity as the sirens drew closer. He could feel the eyes of his neighbors boring into him, some suspicious, some sympathetic, but none stepping forward to intervene. In that moment, Marcus realized this wasn't just about a car. This was about his right to exist in this neighborhood. Without being treated like an intruder, it was about his dignity, his identity, his safety. Karen wasn't just trying to take his car, she was trying to strip him of his humanity, to twist a lie so deeply that it could erase his truth. And as the flashing lights appeared at the end of the street, Marcus knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next would change everything. The red and blue lights flashed against the neat row of houses as two squad cars rolled into the cul-de-sac, sirens cutting off as they slowed to a stop. Marcus felt the ground tilt beneath him. His pulse thudded in his ears, each beat heavier than the last. He stood frozen in front of, his garage hands still raised slightly, keys dangling between his fingers like proof that he belonged there. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't dare make a sudden gesture as the officers stepped out. Karen's voice rang out like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. That's him. That's the man stealing my car. Arrest him. Before he drives away? She waved her arms dramatically, tears brimming in her eyes that hadn't been there moments before. It was a performance, complete with all the desperation of a woman supposedly watching her prized possession vanish. The first officer, Stocky man with graying temples turned to Marcus. His hand hovered near his holstern, grabbing it, but close enough to make Marcus's stomach tighten. The second officer, younger, with a sharp jawline and cautious eyes, scanned between Karen and Marcus, his expression unreadable. "Sir," the older one said firmly, "step away from the vehicle." Now, Marcus inhaled deeply, reminding himself to keep his voice level. "Officer, this is my car. I can show you the registration and proof of purchase inside my house." Karen let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, please. He's making it up as he goes. I just bought that car yesterday. He was probably watching me unload groceries last night, waiting for a chance to sneak in and take it. I told you he was dangerous." The younger officer tilted his head, studying Marcus more closely. "Sir, can you explain why this woman is saying the car is hers?" Marcus clenched his jaw, swallowing the bitterness rising in his throat. "Because she doesn't like me living here. That's the truth. I've owned this home for 5 years. That car," he lifted his keys carefully, showing them in the air, "is mine. I bought it 2 weeks ago. My name is on the title, on the insurance, on everything." Karen stomped her foot like a child denied a toy. "Don't listen to him. People like him always have a story, always have a lie ready. Just check the plates, it'll match my name." Her words sliced through the humid morning air. People like him. Marcus didn't miss the venom, and neither did several neighbors now gathering near the sidewalk. A couple whispered to each other, eyes darting nervously between the officers and Marcus. Another neighbor, an elderly man in a robe, muttered something under his breath before retreating back inside. Everyone was watching, but no one was stepping in. The older officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly irritated by the escalating tension. "Ma'am, if you truly purchased this car, you should have paperwork as well. Do you have it with you?" Karen faltered for only a second before doubling down. "It's inside my house, of course. I wasn't about to bring my files out here." While he's about to drive away, "Why are you wasting time? Just arrest him." The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so let me get this straight. You bought this car yesterday, but you left it in his garage." Karen's face reddened. "Because I don't have enough space in mine right now?" And he offered? "Yes, he offered to let me keep it here until I cleared mine out. But clearly it was just a trick so he could claim it as his own." Marcus almost laughed, the absurdity of it so extreme it bordered on comical. At the weight of the situation crushed the humor before it could surface. Couldn't afford to laugh. Couldn't afford to show anything but calm composure. One misstep, and he'd be the aggressor. "Officers," he said carefully, locking eyes with the younger one, who seemed slightly more open. "Please. My paperwork is inside. If you walk with me into the house, I will show you the registration, the title, the proof of purchase, all of it. The car is registered in my name." Karen shrieked, as if his words were the most damning evidence yet. "He's lying. He'll probably try to fake something inside. You can't let him go in there alone. You need to arrest him now, before he hurts someone." The older officer rubbed his temple, clearly exasperated by Karen's dramatics, but he still hadn't lowered his guard. Marcus knew he was still one twitch away from this turning dangerous. He'd feel sweat beating on his back, not just from the summer heat, but from the gnawing dread that at any second, all right, the situation could tip against him. "All right," the younger officer finally said, his voice calm but firm. "Here's what we're going to do. Sir, you're going to stay right here while my partner checks the plates on this vehicle. Ma'am, if this is your car like you say, the registration will match your name. If not, then we'll need to see the proper documents." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, as if she hadn't expected such a straightforward solution. Marcus caught the flicker of panic in her eyes, though she quickly masked it with another burst of righteous anger. "Yes, do that. You'll see. I'm telling the truth. You'll see what kind of thief he really is." The older officer stepped forward, crouching near the rear of the car, pulling out his notepad. He read the plates aloud into his radio, waiting for dispatch to confirm the registered owner. The seconds stretched like hours. Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense as he stood motionless. Hands still slightly raised, neighbors whispering behind their curtains. Karen paced in small circles, muttering under her breath about how unsafe the neighborhood had become. Finally, the radio crackled. Dispatch's voice came through clearly. Plate number registered to Marcus Johnson. Address Lakeview Oaks. Valid registration. Purchased July 3rd. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief flooding him, but he didn't lower his hands yet. He knew better than to move too soon. The younger officer looked directly at Karen, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, the vehicle is registered to Mr. Johnson. It is not your car." Karen's face contorted, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "No, that's not possible. There has to be a mistake. Maybe he bribed someone at the DMV. Maybe the older officer stood now, clearly fed up. Ma'am, enough. The registration is valid. This car belongs to Mr. Johnson. You made a false report to 911. The crowd of neighbors that had been quietly observing suddenly grew bolder, whispering louder now, some shaking their heads, others looking away in embarrassment. Karen's carefully crafted story was unraveling in public, and for the first time her power seemed to slip. Marcus lowered his hand slightly, but kept his voice even. "Officers, if you'd like, I can still show you the paperwork inside to confirm. But I think the dispatch result speaks for itself." The younger officer nodded. "That won't be necessary. We've got confirmation." He turned to Karen, his tone sharp. "Ma'am, do you understand that making a false 911 call is a crime? You could be charged for wasting police resources, not to mention putting someone in serious danger with your claims." Karen's face turned crimson, but instead of backing down, she doubled down yet again. "You don't understand," he manipulated. "The system somehow... He doesn't belong here. I'm just trying to protect the neighborhood." That phrase, "he doesn't belong here," hung in the air like poison. Several neighbors flinched at the words, the naked prejudice laid bare. A few turned away entirely, unable to watch. Marcus stood tall, saying nothing. He didn't need to. Karen's unraveling was doing all the work for him. The older officer finally snapped his notebook shut. "Ma'am, unless you can provide actual proof that this car belongs to you, which at this point seems impossible, you need to step back and let us do our job. Right now, the evidence shows you made a false report." "I could take you in for that," Karen gasped, her bravado faltering. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across her face. You wouldn't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I've lived here for years. I've always supported law enforcement." The younger officer's jaw tightened. "Supporting law enforcement doesn't mean you get to weaponize us against your neighbors. You put this man in danger today with your lies. Do you understand that?" Marcus felt a quiet vindication settle in his chest. He wasn't fully safe. Yet he knew Karen would continue to be a thorn in his side. But in this moment, with the truth out in the open, the balance had shifted. Karen sputtered, looking around at the gathered neighbors, desperate for anyone to support her. But silence greeted her. Even those who had once tolerated her iron-fisted HOA rules seemed unwilling to side with her now. She was exposed, her power crumbling under the weight of her own prejudice. The older officer sighed, finally addressing Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for the trouble. Clearly you've been put in a difficult situation because of a false accusation. You have every right to file a report about this." Marcus nodded slowly, still keeping his composure. "Thank you, officer. I'll consider it." As the officers began escorting Karen away from his driveway to have a word with her by the squad car, Marcus stood by his silver Mercedes, staring at its gleaming surface. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was the battleground for his dignity, and he had just defended it without ever raising his voice. But as he watched Karen arguing desperately with the officers, one thought burned in his mind. This wasn't over. It's not by a long shot. Marcus leaned against the edge of his garage, his heartbeat still uneven, though the flashing lights had been turned off. The neighborhood was quiet now, except for Karen's shrill protests as the officers tried to reason with her near the squad car. The crowd of neighbors, realizing there was no fight, no dramatic arrest, began to thin out, though whispers still floated on the morning air. Curtains shifted as people retreated inside, but Marcus knew they were still watching. Still gossiping, he rubbed his temples, fatigue washing over him. This wasn't the first time Karen had made his life difficult, but it was certainly the worst. She'd escalated beyond nasty letters and HOA fines into something dangerous, something that could have cost him his life. All because he dared to exist in a space she believed he didn't deserve. The younger officer walked back over, his posture softer now. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "again, I'm sorry you had to go through this. You handled yourself calmly. Honestly, most people would have been a lot less patient under the circumstances." Marcus gave a small, weary nod. "I didn't have much of a choice, officer. People like me don't get the luxury of losing our temper." The officer's eyes flickered with discomfort, and he didn't disagree. Instead, he shifted. "If you want, we can document this. File a full report on her false claims. It'll go on record." Marcus thought about it for a long moment. Filing a report could mean Karen faced legal consequences. But more importantly, it would create a paper trail, something concrete, to show that she wasn't just a difficult neighbor, she was malicious. It was tempting, but part of him knew Karen wasn't the type to back down, even if she was charged. She thrived on control and appearances. Humiliation might do more damage to her than any fine or misdemeanor. "I'll think about it," Marcus finally said. The younger officer nodded before heading back to his partner. Karen was still ranting, hands waving as though she could spin the narrative back into her favor. "You don't understand. This is my neighborhood. He doesn't respect the rules. If you let him get away with this, there will be chaos. You're making a mistake." But the officers weren't buying it anymore. Their stiff, polite responses made it clear they were done entertaining her delusions. Eventually, they escorted her back toward her own property. They didn't cuff her. Marcus knew they probably wouldn't, but the message was clear. She was on thin ice. When the patrol cars finally rolled away, taking the flashing lights with them, the silence felt almost too heavy. Marcus stood in his driveway, staring at the car that had triggered the morning's chaos. His Mercedes gleamed under the sun, but now it seemed less like a symbol of achievement and more like a magnet for resentment. He had worked for years to afford it, and in just 10 minutes, Karen had tried to turn it into evidence of theft. As he gathered himself to head inside, a voice broke the silence. "Marcus." He turned to see Mrs. Delgado from across the street, her arms crossed but her face softened. She was usually friendly in passing, but not the type to get involved. Today, though, her voice carried something different. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. It wasn't right." Marcus managed a small smile. "Thank you. But it's not the first time she's tried something like this. Just the first time it's gone this far." Mrs. Delgado hesitated before nodding toward Karen's house. "Maybe it's the last. People saw what she did today. The whole street knows now." Marcus appreciated the sentiment, but he doubted Karen would stop. Anything, she would likely double down, spinning herself as the victim, twisting the story into some new complaint. Still, it was a small comfort to know others had witnessed the truth. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the neighborhood in gold, Marcus sat on his porch with a glass of iced tea, trying to shake off the tension. But Karen's house. Across the street was buzzing. Cars came and went, other HOA board members, no doubt summoned for an emergency meeting. He chuckled bitterly at the thought. She wasn't regrouping to admit fault. She was regrouping to attack. Sure enough, the next morning, a letter appeared taped to his front door. Bold red letters at the top read, "Notice of violation." According to Karen and her board, his garage was being used for unauthorized purposes. His vehicle was deemed a disruptive presence not in keeping with community standards. Marcus laughed out loud, the sound sharp in the quiet. Morning, she was relentless. Even after being exposed, she still tried to weaponize her power. But this time, Marcus wasn't going to let her dictate the rules. This time, he had the upper hand. He spent the next 2 days carefully compiling everything. The 911 call, documented by police, witnesses from the neighborhood who had seen Karen's meltdown. Copies of every petty violation she had ever issued. Him from the time his trash bin sat outside for 10 minutes. Too long to the letter about his front lawn being too green compared to others. He gathered it all into a thick binder, a paper shield against her tyranny. Then, on the night of the next HOA meeting, Marcus showed up. The room was small, cramped with folding chairs. The walls lined with posters about community pride. Karen sat at the front like a queen at her throne, gavel in hand, her smile tight. She clearly wasn't expecting Marcus to walk in. The murmur of neighbors filled the room until Karen banged the gavel. "Order, order," she said with false authority. "Tonight we must address the ongoing issue with Mr. Johnson and his vehicle." Marcus stood before she could continue, his binder tucked under his arm. "Actually, I'd like to address that issue myself." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Homeowners don't have the floor until recognized by the board." Marcus opened the binder and laid it flat on the table in front of everyone. His voice was calm but steady, carrying through the room. "What everyone here needs to know is that 2 days ago, your HOA president called 911 and falsely reported that I had stolen my own car. She tried to have me arrested or worse over something she knew wasn't true." The room went silent. Karen's face turned pale. "That is not," she began, but Marcus cut her off, flipping open the binder. "Here's the police dispatch log proving the car is mine. Here's the officer's statement confirming she made a false report." And here he turned a page, showing the stack of violations she had sent over the years or all the times she harassed me for petty nonsense. "This is not leadership. This is abuse of power." Whispers filled the room. Neighbors leaned in, studying the pages, murmuring their discontent. Some looked genuinely shocked. Others looked like they had been waiting for someone to finally say it aloud. Karen slammed the gavel. "This is outrageous. He's twisting the facts to make me look bad. He's always been difficult." But Marcus didn't flinch. He met every eye in the room. "I've lived here 5 years.
I my dues.
I mow my lawn. I respect my neighbors. I mind my business. What I don't do is call the police on people out of spite. Ask yourselves if she'll do this to me. Who's next?" That question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. A man in the back finally spoke up. "He's right. Karen, you fined me 3 times for having my kids' bikes on the lawn." 3 times. Is that really what this neighborhood is supposed to be about? Another voice chimed in. She told me I couldn't paint my shutters blue. Said it wasn't up to standards. But there are 3 houses down the street with the exact same color. The floodgates opened. One by one, people began sharing their grievances, small slights and petty rules that Karen had enforced with an iron fist. For years, they had grumbled in private, but now, with Marcus standing tall and fearless, they felt emboldened. Karen pounded the gavel again, her voice rising to a near scream. "This is mutiny. You're all being manipulated." But the tide had turned. The board members themselves, sitting beside her, looked uneasy. One of them, a middle-aged woman with glasses, finally cleared her throat. "Karen, maybe it's time to reconsider how things have been run. We're supposed to serve the community, not police it." Karen gaped at her, betrayed. "You can't. Be serious." But the room was no longer hers. The power she had clung to so tightly was slipping through her fingers. She knew it. Marcus closed the binder and straightened his shoulders. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here to remind you all that this neighborhood belongs to everyone who lives here, not just the people who think they own it. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is my car." Applause started small, but grew, echoing in the cramped room until even the walls seemed to hum with it. Karen's face crumpled, fury and humiliation battling across her expression. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the gavel rattled on the table. Marcus stood there, letting the sound of the applause sink in. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter, freer. He knew Karen wouldn't disappear entirely people. Like her rarely did, but she no longer held the unquestioned power she once had. And as he walked back home that night, past the car that had sparked it all, Marcus felt a quiet triumph, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been silenced under her reign. Because in the end, the truth had done what it always does, set him free.